This week's video is brought to you by Tokyo Treat, but more on them later. Sasha Nein is easily one of the most likable and influential characters in the Psychonauts franchise, and so the fact that we are able to enter his mind so early serves a lot of different purposes, which would then be built upon heavily in future mental worlds within this first Psychonauts game. But the question is, how does Raz actually end up getting the chance to enter Sasha's mind in the first place? While in the later stages of the game, once Raz reaches Thorny Towers, Raz enters the minds of the residents there with reckless abandon. But after Raz reaches a very Linda-shaped impasse in the brain tumbler experiment, Sasha invites Raz into his mind in order to begin working on his PSI-Blast ability. And immediately upon entering Sasha's mental world, we are able to see that this is going to be completely different from the mind of Coach Oleander or the brain tumbler. But before you go any further, did you know that only 89% of people who watch these videos are actually subscribed to the YouTube channel? So real quick, make sure to hit that subscribe button, the like button, and why not even ring that notification bell if you like Psychonauts content coming from this channel. I would really appreciate it. But with all that out of the way, we see immediately that Sasha's mind is represented by a giant cube floating in a void that has textures that appear to be like neural pathways in the background. Everything in this mind is pristine and perfect and all neatly tucked away just how Sasha wants it, showing us just how much control that he has garnered over his mind over the years, with him even telling Raz that it was high time he learned what an organized mind looks like. Now, the choice of making his mind a cube is incredibly striking for a number of reasons, with the first being that throughout the course of history, the cube has often been associated with the rational mind of mankind. It's a symbol of completeness, solidity, and durability, and I don't think it's any coincidence that a character like Sasha would have a mind that is represented in a way like this. And while at this point in the game, we are still getting to know who Sasha is as a character, seeing how greatly his mind contrasts with the mind of a character like Coach Oleander speaks more towards his character than any exposition ever could. It shows to us as the player just how much Sasha, being the man of science that he is, prides himself on his rational thinking ability in a variety of circumstances. But we can't ignore the design that is present on each side of the cube. While I wish the art within his mind was something more akin to Cubism, because I think that would just be a really fun play on words, in reality it is much more intelligently designed than that. In fact, it appears that it is based on Brutalist architecture, which, if you're unfamiliar, is a style of architecture that is characterized by deliberate plainness, crudity, or violence of imagery. The term was first applied to functionalist buildings of the 1950s and 1960s that made great use of steel and concrete in starkly massive blocks. Now, as we'll remember from Black Velvetopia, the mind of Edgar Teagley, which we covered on the channel a while back, when Psychonauts developers use art as an inspiration for a level, there are no accidents. And so I think it is worth noting that a key player that influenced the development of Brutalist architecture as we know it today was the Bauhaus, a German art school that was operational from 1919 to 1933 that combined crafts and the fine arts. The school was known for its goal of combining aesthetics with everyday function while marrying together the ideas of mass production and an individual's artistic vision. This is all really interesting, whether this was intended or not, because Sasha was created to be very obviously of German descent, so it's not surprising that his mind would take on a style of art that was inspired by a very prominent German art school, while putting his own very Sasha-esque flair onto it. But the fact that this very pragmatic style of architecture came into form in the real world during a post-war era makes it even more interesting, in my opinion, that this level comes right after Coach Oleander's Mental World Basic Braining, which is focused entirely on war. Now, when the level actually begins, Sasha is discussing with Raz how to use his Psy-Blast ability, and has Raz focusing on destroying hideous Tiffany lamps. And keep these lamps in mind, because we'll come back to this in a second. So once Raz had fully completed the task of destroying these lamps, Sasha then introduces us to a mind sensor, with sensors being, as we've discussed in many of the other Psychonauts videos, essentially the white blood cells of the brain that fight off things that do not belong there, while keeping the mind sane and fully functional. And with this, Sasha leaves Raz to his own devices to train these Psy-Blast abilities on this slow trickle of sensors, which this is very akin to the Bauhaus's mentality of mass production, because Sasha leaves Raz with a gauge that can increase the rate at which sensors can be created within the mind. So, being the impatient young man that he is, Raz obviously cranks this gauge to the absolute highest degree possible, which seemingly causes the destabilization of Sasha's mind, with items from Sasha's past bursting out of the various sides of the cube, with the first side we see showing us a lot of blocks for a young child and a tattered bed with an uncovered mattress. And the first indicator that this is an area of relevance to Sasha is the fact that we see not only emotional baggage on the bed frame, indicating that Sasha still holds some unresolved emotional baggage connected with this area, as well as some mental cobwebs, because this is from a time when he was very young. But the level shows us exactly what this baggage represents in Sasha's very first memory vault. In this vault, we are introduced to Sasha's loving mother from his perspective as a very young child. She was nurturing, loving, and all around a seemingly wonderful mother, though shortly after his birth, she falls ill and in turn passes away. And so I want to direct your attention in this slide to the lamp sitting on the bedside table right beside his mother. Now, if you'll remember, earlier in this level, Sasha was having Raz destroy the Tiffany lamps in his mind, saying that they're disgusting and horribly tacky, which in this context could definitely give the impression that he created a mental connection between these kinds of lamps and his mother's death. And this idea was actually confirmed by Tim Schafer. In essence, Sasha from a very young age began utilizing a maladaptive defense mechanism known as displacement, which is defined by the American Psychological Association as being the transfer of feelings or behaviors from their original object to another person or thing. This makes sense because with Psy-Blast being the culmination of aggressive mental energy, Sasha displaces these negative emotions surrounding his mother's death onto these hideous lamps. However, Psychonauts 2 surprisingly provides us with some additional and much needed context in regard to his opinions on these lamps. Because if we look in his office in the mother lobe, we actually see that he has a Tiffany lamp of his own that looks strikingly similar to the one pictured in his memory. And so while he may see these lamps as being horribly tacky and displace these negative emotions onto them, it's still very possible that he has held at least his mother's lamp in some sort of reverence out of respect for his late mother. And it makes sense that a Tiffany lamp would be present in his home growing up, because historically, these lamps in particular were incredibly popular in, you guessed it, Germany. I've also heard that Sasha later in life ended up working at a Tiffany lamp factory, but I couldn't find concrete evidence of that. If this is the case though, then he could also just have a distaste for these lamps from being overexposed to them over the course of his life. I mean, I have the same reaction to the products of anywhere that I've worked for a long time. But something that I've never had a distaste for is this week's sponsor, Tokyo Treat. Tokyo Treat is a monthly Japanese subscription box full of popular Japanese candy and snacks such as Japan-exclusive Kit Kats, ramen, and many more. It's Tokyo Treat's mission to share Japanese culture throughout the world through the medium of snacking. And so with every single Tokyo Treat box, it comes with an incredible assortment of snacks, but also this spectacular booklet that outlines a lot about Japanese culture history, and not to mention all of the amazing snacks that are going to be in this box and what's in them. And so diving into this box, the first thing that catches my eye is this bag of Scone Quattro cheese, which looks like an incredible kind of cheese puff-like snack. So this is what it looks like. That's incredible. That is literally incredible. This is really good. And I'm glad that the bag is so gigantic because it gives you so much, so it's not like you're gonna plow through this in one sitting. So I'm gonna come back to that. And so the next thing that I really wanted to try is these porky potato fries. And that's everything I want from a potato fry. It's salty, it's got the perfect crunch to it. Honestly, I feel like I could eat this for days, and I'm going to be very sad when it's all gone, but they do give you a good amount to kind of go through. Really good. A+. But you know, no good snack session is finished without a good beverage. And so we have this caramel popcorn soda, which I am fascinated to find out what this tastes like and whether or not it lives up to the name of a caramel popcorn soda. So it very much lives up to the name of a caramel popcorn soda because it tastes like I am drinking liquidized movie theater popcorn. And honestly, I really love that they include these drinks in these snack boxes because it really kind of ties the whole package together. And all of these snacks are just the tip of the iceberg for this month's theme, Snack in Shibuya, which takes pop culture snacks from all corners of downtown Tokyo and puts it into one nice, neat package. So if any of these amazing snacks interest you, make sure you use the code ThoughtB to get $5 off your first purchase of Tokyo Treat. And now let's dive back into the mind of Sasha Nein. I would be lying if I were to say that this was the only effect that his mother's death had on him. Now, it's no secret that the works of both Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung heavily pervade the Psychonauts franchise, and I believe that Sasha is a golden example of this. Many of Freud's theories acted as building blocks for future psychological research and discovery, with one of these building blocks being Freud's psychosexual stages of development, which is comprised of 5 stages that a child will navigate throughout the course of their childhood. And while this theory is a bit dated at this point, there are ongoing debates surrounding any validity that it may or may not have. And so I think Sasha as a character was built around this idea, and I want to focus primarily on the oral stage of psychosexual development. Now, in Freud's theory, the oral stage lasts from birth to 1 year of age. And according to the Old Psychopedia, the website that was run by Double Fine until 2008, Sasha lost his mother while he was still an infant, which oftentimes infancy is considered to be a similar age range to the oral stage of psychosexual development. And at this point, I should probably actually explain the relevance of this stage in particular. Well, it was theorized by Freud that in the oral stage, the main part of a child's body that they use to interact with the world around them and derive pleasure is their mouth via eating or tasting. And this is clearly represented in his memory vault. And so this being combined with the inherent dependency that infants have on their caretakers, in Sasha's case, this being his parents, these oral tendencies help to build trust between the child and said caretaker. However, if a child's oral needs are not met, at least according to Freud, they will develop what is known as an oral fixation. And so, with the inevitable loss of his mother, who, at least based on his memories in the memory vault, appeared to be his primary caretaker, I would not be surprised if his oral needs were no longer met. And this in turn led to an oral fixation. And when someone has an oral fixation, according to Freud, it's believed that this could lead to behaviors that satiate these oral impulses through things like alcohol abuse, nail biting, overeating, and in the case of Sasha specifically, smoking, which is a behavior that he has carried with him all the way through adulthood and into the present day. And the last slides of the memory vault really focus on Sasha staring at his grieving father from behind a window or through the gate of a crib, highlighting just how separated the two of them are after the death of his mother. And so once Raz is able to complete this side of the cube, another side bursts out with several pillars as well as a floating structure that is reminiscent of the kinetic art created by Alexander Calder that is meant to illustrate movement and balance, which in part helps to illustrate that Sasha is simply a great appreciator of the arts, I guess, but it also could be a subtle hint that at this point in his life, he's probably found peace and balance, at least for the most part. And so, moving on to the third side of the cube that erupts, we see several shoe boxes, a shoe itself, containers of shoe shine, and a tape measure sprawl throughout the level, illustrating to us Sasha's time as a cobbler with his father, which, when we reach the second memory vault, makes a lot of sense as to why this is so prominent in his mind. In his second memory vault, we see a much older Sasha working in the shop with his father as a cobbler. However, whenever he asks questions about his mother, his father seemingly refuses to answer them, which causes the fledgling psychic that Sasha was to use his powers to read his father's mind. And while he sees a lot of very wholesome memories of his mother and just how good of a person she was from his dad's perspective, he also saw a rather lewd memory that understandably disturbed the young Sasha to the point that he felt the need to run away from home. Now, this strikes at another defense mechanism that is possible that Sasha has used in the past based on the structure of his mind, which is that of repression, which is defined by the APA as being the defense mechanism that excludes painful experiences and unacceptable impulses from consciousness. Repression operates on an unconscious level as a protection against anxiety produced by objectionable wishes, feelings of hostility, and ego-threatening experiences and memories of all kinds. Which I think, based on the fact that all of these different portions of his mind are shoved down within the cube, could illustrate that at least at one point they were all pushed down outside of Sasha's consciousness. But the idea that this is a memory that Sasha has struggled with at one point and potentially still struggles with is further compounded by the fact that this area is infested by a new enemy type known as personal demons, which, when described by the game, are considered to be something that, while small, are something that you have to deal with before they blow up in your face, showing to us that at least at one point, Sasha had a lot of personal demons to work through regarding his father's mind and reading it. And finally, the last side of the cube represents what appears to be a very industrial looking factory that lends credence to this idea that maybe he had worked at a lamp factory at one point prior to joining the Psychonauts. But once Raz is finally able to clear up all of the leaking sensors in this area, things begin going off the rails a little bit, because going along with this idea of repression, Raz inquires to Sasha about what would happen if all of a person's sensor outlets had been closed, to which Sasha responds by saying this.
Well, there would be a buildup of sensor energy within that would, eventually run Rasputin very fast. You are my own creation. I command you to stop!
And so, with the mega sensor romping around the mind, Raz needs to stifle it to re-regulate Sasha's mind again, and thus obtain the PSI-Blast merit badge from Sasha Nein and leave the mental world altogether. Though, what's interesting about Sasha's mind in particular is that when we return after the fact, we learn that everything that had happened in this mental world was actually all part of a plan and was actually just a course that Sasha had designed within his own mind, anticipating that Raz would get hasty and things would go a little bit haywire. This brings me back to this idea that Sasha is actually a very balanced and even keel character mentally, and while he does still harbor emotional baggage just like everyone else, he is the master of his own mind, and he is able to effectively control it as long as no one shuts off all of the pathways for his sensors to spawn from. Because this ended up leading to an unanticipated mega sensor, which Sasha even admitted was not part of the plan. And so, since Sasha is so willing to share his past and his experiences with Raz, this tells me that he has likely reached a place of acceptance of himself and all of these past experiences, and is happy to share them for the benefit of the next generation of Psychonauts, so that they too can harness and strengthen their psychic abilities. Sasha is probably one of my favorite characters in all of Psychonauts, and having the chance to see his mind so early in the franchise is such a treat, and his brilliance and appeal, at least in my opinion, is only compounded in Psychonauts 2. And who knows, maybe someday we'll get to see Agent 9 again in another entry into the Psychonauts franchise. But that'll do it for this week's video, guys, and I want to pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts on Sasha Nein, and is there anything that I missed? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below, and while you're down there, why aren't liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and why aren't even ringing that notification bell so you never miss another upload? And please, let me know what other minds you would like me to take a look at in the future, whether it's from Psychonauts 1 or 2. I would love to know. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and why not even a fantastic rest of your month. And I will see you in the next video. Later.